Dear friends, respected Sri Suresh Prabhuji, I have great pleasure in extending a warm and hearty welcome to you all to this webinar on a crisis is also an opportunity and how India can significantly gain in the post-COVID new world order. We are grateful to see Suresh Prabhuji, Honorable Member of Parliament and a dear friend, to accept our request and to come today and address all of us in this webinar. It is my duty here, although Mr. Suresh Prabhu needs no introduction. He is a seasoned parliamentarian, many terms. His work is well spoken. He's been a Central Union Minister. The Chamber has the pleasure of interacting with him in the past. Yet I will try and do just a brief introduction for Mr. Prabhu. He is a man of multiple talents. The reason we have called him is that he's known to for his out-of-box and innovative thinking and to provide solutions when none exist. Just one example out of his legendary career is the reforms in the power sector that he had initiated. I know we are at 12:33 and we have got limited time with Sri Suresh Prabhuji, and he has suggested that whoever has questions can post the questions on the chat. He can listen to these questions and then he will not only respond to the questions but also try and address the topic that we are facing today. Our request to him would be to say just a few words just to set the tone and the topic of today's order in place. The lockdown has turned everything upside down. There is general gloom and doom everywhere. Businessmen have no idea what will happen next, how to pay the next level of salaries, how to pay their electricity bills, what will happen to their businesses. At the same time, from the government and from a lot of other sources, we keep on hearing that this is an opportunity, there will be a boom. So we don't know, and so we are all a little lost. And to usher in a little bit of positivity, we thought that we could have a session with you wherein we cover our topic as crisis is also an opportunity. And sir, with these words, I would like to hand it over to you. Thank you, sir. Rishabh, you have to. Rishabh, can you unmute him?
I'm doing that. Ha, sir, you're unmuted.
Yeah. Okay. Also, my dear friend Raja, and of course, Saria ji and all of them for being here. And I'm very happy that I can talk to you again. As I said, I would rather answer all the questions, but I just make few points which he talked about, Mr. Saria talked about, Vishalji about Make in India. And then Vivekji correctly said the situation, how it is going to come. So let us look at a global scenario for a few minutes, only few minutes. The US, almost 22-23 billion dollar economy, which is almost 23% of the global GDP, has come out with a package which is almost now 13-14% of the GDP. In fact, it is estimated as a result of that US will have a 16% of the GDP to fiscal deficit. US already has surpassed almost 126% before all this, 126% of public debt to GDP ratio. The European Union is still struggling to do that. So when the money is coming so much into the market, what does it mean? That a global liquidity will be huge. Same time, to boost economic activity, all the banks in the world, central banks in the world, are reducing interest rates. So virtually, there is plenty of money, liquidity, and the cost of that money is so cheap, almost to zero. There is going to be, this money will be chasing some investment opportunities, obviously. Now, where would the investment go? It's a question. Can it come naturally like the flow of water? Water flows into the direction in which there is already a natural flow that is possible. The same way, this money can come into many areas. It can go into the stock market, And that's the easiest way because portfolio investors always try to make money and they're more liquid so that they can exit very quickly. So one set of advantage India will have is our equity market, actually, if you really look at it. Because not necessarily because of fundamentals, but because of the liquidity. For example, if you can borrow at say 0.2% or 0.3% in some country, or in Japan you can borrow even at a lower rate, and then I have to invest it in some other market, the arbitrage itself will be so good that I'll be able to make money out of it. So this one area that India can benefit is because of the global liquidity, because of this equity market. For that, our equity market, the paper that these companies will like to buy or the funds will like to buy, will have to have a good fundamental. So good companies in India who can show good fundamentals can actually attract money. The second issue is the pension funds and the sovereign wealth funds. They have huge money. See, sovereign wealth funds are continue to have money. Like some sovereign wealth fund will have some problem. For example, sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia, maybe because of the fiscal deficit. And because the oil price is going so low. But there are funds like UAE, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, Mubadala in US, or in Norway, they have created a sovereign wealth fund which is $1 trillion fund. They set aside the money from the surpluses of oil in the past. Maybe some fund they will draw to bridge over the deficit, not Norway, but some other countries. But still the sovereign wealth fund will have this money. The pension funds, they are not losing any money because already the pension funds have the regular money which keep coming to them from the salaries and also from the contribution that the employees make. So that type of funds will be available. So one set of emerging scenario that will happen after all this is the liquidity in the market will be huge. Even in India, liquidity will not be a problem. RBI has opened new windows. So one part of the issue is of liquidity. But liquidity does not mean there are other problems. Sometimes company may have solvency but no liquidity. Like I may have real estate, I may have this, but I cannot sell it tomorrow. I have to pay my salaries, my regular bills, and I need liquidity. So one part of the problem is that sovereign solvency may be there, but liquidity may not be there. But other problem is that I may have too much of liquidity, but not necessarily solvency. Because solvency will come from business ideas. And for that, our economy as a whole must grow at a faster rate. So that economic activity will be pushed up. When economic activity goes up, obviously individual companies' incomes will go up, and therefore the solvency will also come in. So this is a very interesting paradox that we'll be dealing with in the future time. Second issue, which I think will be of great concern to all of us, and Vishal Bhai was asking me about it. I think I should not be saying Vishal Bhai in Calcutta, I should say Vishal Babu. So I think Vishal Babu would be very keen to, we are asking that question. Just imagine, we agree that post-COVID world will change. It is going to change, 100% it change. It already changed. Like otherwise we'll not be talking like this. Raja would have invited me to Kolkata, I would have enjoyed Mishti Doi and I would have been very happy to be there. But we are not there and still we are talking. So the world has changed in this small manner. A significant change is 100% already happened. Maybe we'll feel it little later. And therefore, I feel that one change, or that's not a real change, but one thing we must accept, whether you like it or not. Manufacturing has to happen. The way we manufacture might change. The way to manufacture might change, and that's why I'm talking about Make in India. So therefore, I'm just giving this background. What is way to manufacture? One is more and more technology-oriented manufacturing will happen. Today there is CAD. We design a product on a machine. It is going to be now probably not just machine is going to determine your design, but machine can manufacture virtually everything. Ravos, of course, now the advanced robots are coming, and robots are really doing fantastic job. China is now developing a completely new generation of robots. Though China has so many people, as many as India, but still they're working on that. The point is, the manufacturing therefore has to happen because the way is manufacturing, which I said. But can we live without manufacturing? Whether we like it or not, we need a product. We cannot live in isolation. I cannot just imagine I'm talking on phone, maybe wireless, but wireless has to be manufactured. Even wireless is something that has to be manufactured. So therefore, the type of product that we are using today might change, but manufacturing has to happen. Now, the question which I was saying, the way we manufacture one thing, and the secondly, place we manufacture will also change. Today, the whole world thought, and rightly so, that global value chain and global supply chains are the right way to do it. And in fact, in future, in my opinion, same thing will happen. Maybe the supply chain dynamics will change. Like today, the whole world is getting everything manufactured from China. It might change and Vietnam will emerge, India will emerge, Bangladesh will be there, and other countries will come in. And we have the advantage of why we should not be there. But that doesn't mean that we'll automatically get it. We'll have to work on it very aggressively. But even before this happened, even before the corona, the McKinsey Global Institute had made a report about a year and a half ago, wherein they said that global manufactured output will obviously significantly will shift to Asia. It already happened. There are already, if you look at Asian tigers, China, all put together, they manufacture bulk of it. But then made a very interesting point that not just in Asia, but India has a great advantage. We can actually take advantage of this post-COVID more than before. Because now the whole world is rethinking about their commitment to China. And even before COVID, people were wanting to move out of China. Why? Because of high cost. See, the Chinese manufacturing model, and therefore there is a lesson to be learned for Make in India for us. China's manufacturing model was low cost, high volume manufacturing. Low cost, high volume, but also very labor intensive. And because the labor cost was low, the low cost was possible. Now the labor cost in China also is going up. In fact, average cost in China is probably, not necessarily in all level, but most of the level is, if not double, at least close to it from India's standard. And therefore it is going to Vietnam, it was going to Bangladesh, it was going to other countries where the labor costs were low. So labor intensive businesses shifted. China already had planned it, factored it. China was already moving into high technology oriented manufacturing. In fact, if you really look at it, it has happened worldwide. Japan started as low quality manufacturing. In fact, all of you are much younger than me. When I was a young boy, people would say manufacturing in Japan means low cost, low quality. Today we say making in Japan is the best quality. That time we are saying, oh, made in USA, made in Europe, oh, fantastic quality. Now there is nothing is made in USA, nothing is made in Europe, so therefore that possibility is not there. But Japan then became high quality product. Korea already moved that ladder. So China was already trying to move up to that before this happened. So therefore, China was moving on to that. China was also moving to other model at a macro level. That is moving from investment-led growth to consumption-led growth. So what is the change? See, this change is very important. And which is why I think we should, as a country, we should strategize it properly. Why China could become manufacturing powerhouse? Because what they're manufacturing was consumed somewhere, and US and Europe are the big markets. So consumption will happen. As I was saying initially, manufacturing has to happen, consumption also will happen. Otherwise, if consumption and manufacturing don't go hand in hand, there is nothing possible. You not manufacture something which is not consumed, which is not bought by somebody. So when China is also moving into consumption oriented model, which US has always been. Incidentally, in US, the consumption to GDP ratio is more than 75%, 80% almost. So consumption-led growth is something which the developed economies have adopted. Now China being already 14.85 trillion, almost $15 trillion economy, per capita income of closing now to $8,500, obviously consumption will be heavy. Just imagine Europe, China now, Japan, Korea, US, of course Canada, so most of the other OECD countries, they become now consumption oriented business model. Somebody has to produce. I'm giving a background to all this. So Vishal Bhai, Make in India, Vishal Babu, sorry, Make in India will become a very important possibility. Now to make that happen, it is not just going to happen because it can happen. There's a difference between what can happen and what could really happen. For that, we'll have to work together, completely new orientation towards business. First, we must accept business as now we are saying Corona warriors. I think we'll have to also say business is economic warriors. They help economy to grow. And the advantage India has got is that most of our business is in private sector. In India, agriculture, which is almost 60-65% of the economy, all the farmers are entrepreneurs. Definitely, you cannot say farmers are not, they are the biggest entrepreneurs because they take highest risk. All in private hands. China didn't have that. China had all the land nationalized in 1949. Russia didn't have that. So in India, private sector is something which already knows all types of business. Retail business is 100% private. In China, it was not private. Even taxi owners were employees of the state. We had already had this advantage of private sector. And therefore, if you really make so, therefore, Make in India will have to be private sector driven, entrepreneurship driven. New ideas have to come in. And therefore, Make in India and Startup India must go hand in hand. New ideas must come in from Startup India, and the Make in India will actually take it forward to make it in India. Then for Make in India to be successful, we will also make designing in India. Because designing has the highest value. Manufacturing has low value. So that's what US mastered. Nike is designed in US but made in China or in Vietnam somewhere. But Nike still makes huge profit. iPhone is never manufactured in US. It is manufactured in Foxconn by so many places. But iPhone is sitting on few $1 trillion of cash. Why? Because they designed it. So we have to make in India, we have to also design it in India. Number 2 or number 3, number 4, whatever, we'll have to bring all arms of the state together to make in India. It cannot happen that Make in India will happen because of only entrepreneurship and ability of the private sector. All the government entities must support that activity. And that's what I was saying, we'll have to recognize them as economic warriors. We can actually make them grow Indian economy, and Indian economy grows, obviously they will create more jobs. The US is the largest economy not because US government is running any business there. It is US business is run by all the private companies through entrepreneurship, but government supports them. Like even today, you can see the government putting in so much of money, trillions of dollars to support private business. So we'll have to work out on a model like this to make it happen. But I can see, and therefore I was giving the example of the global trend that is going to change. I think, Raja, you are recording this my speech, na? Because I also don't know what I was speaking. So maybe
we are recording, sir.
Actually, there is a great possibility of taking advantage of this. I feel India would be a great winner from this. All this before it started, I had prepared this blueprint for $5 trillion economy. As Prime Minister Modi has always been talking about it, I was as a commerce industry minister, I said, let me prepare it. But 20% of 5 trillion, that is $1 trillion will come from industry. And I was saying industry leaders were prepared it. I got CI involved. I said, that's not prepared by my bureaucracy in my ministry, but by a real industrialist. So we are ready with what $1 trillion will consist of. Steel, cement, how much will come it from? New technologies, how much will bring it? And to make that happen, I had prepared a draft industrial policy, which actually was on the website, and I'm sure now we'll be announcing it, but it was ready even before the election. The second part is services. 60% of $5 trillion, that is $3 trillion, will come from services. For which 12 champion sectors were identified, and we already said that the 12 champion sectors will get 5,000 crores approved by the cabinet, so that this will become globally scalable and they can actually create jobs, because service sector will create more jobs. Industry will not create as many jobs because there will be more mechanized, as I was saying earlier, the way we manufacture is going to change. But service sector will create huge jobs. They are very labor intensive. And in India, we have to have everything which is labor intensive, but economically viable. Like agriculture is labor intensive, but not economically viable, because there are too many people on agriculture. There is a disguised employment. So we must have labor intensive industries, labor intensive activities, whether in services or in agriculture, but which is oriented towards efficiency, productivity, and that's the only way we can actually be taking advantage of it globally. So unless we work on all the issues, will not happen. So I think it is definitely doable. I'm very sure about it, and Make in India will happen. We have to work on getting those companies into India and in Kolkata also, because Kolkata was a thriving center of trade for decades, or for more than a century. And therefore, this is all possible, that we can actually restore the glory of Kolkata and West Bengal, because they are the frontier to the eastern part of the world, where there is going to be more activity. In fact, if you look at it, the Asian tigers are east of India. Second largest economy, China, is east of India. Third largest economy, Japan, is east of India. The third largest economy of Asia, not India or the world, but Asia, Korea, is east of India. Actually, in a way, east of India is going to be the future of the world also. And we are very well located. We have the port facilities. We have the ability of making business, and we have the experience. It's not of recent times, but for many generations, the business was done from Kolkata, and people were thinking that Kolkata is a city that they must emulate. In fact, Bangkok has now become very attractive for many reasons. But people that time were thinking that Kolkata is far better than most of the cities in that part of the world. People used to come to Kolkata as something like a dream. Like I was born in Mumbai, but earlier people used to come to Mumbai to say, Mumbai meri jaan. So abhi Mumbai ki jaan ja rahi hai, wo alag baat hai. But now this was the situation of our country. So I think we are well positioned, well placed to take advantage of it. So thank you. I answer about this Make in India, giving perspective on that. Thank you.
Rishabh, can you moderate the session and ask questions in the chat? There are a lot of questions. Just go by one. I'll probably take this advantage and ask the first question myself. Sir, a lot of representations have been sent to the government from chambers of association, from businessmen, but there is a radio silence from the government on any of our problems that we are facing. Sir, you want us to be economic warriors. Sir, we share your enthusiasm. So we are this. I think the entrepreneurial community will respond heavily to this opportunity. But sir, we are facing existential crisis. Our basic survivals are at question. So why is there a radio silence from the government? Why do you think, or if you know something that the government is going to reply something? Because sir, for the last so many days, we've not heard anything from the government. I just wanted to know your views. And over to you, Rishabh, for the future questions.
You're right. Actually, just before this video conference that I'm having, I was having a video conference with Andhra Pradesh, because I'm a member of parliament from Andhra Pradesh. We are from West Bengal. We are of course colleagues, but I'm from Andhra Pradesh. So there were, and then my other colleagues from Andhra Pradesh, from the party, of course, they're also in that conference, and then all the industry leaders were there. And we heard a lot of their issues, which I've been hearing every now and then, because I've been having so many such webinars and conferences. I have decided, I mean, when we received that memorandum from many people today in the afternoon, in the morning, we are going to take them to the finance minister in the next 1 or 2 days. But I think the Prime Minister had already announced that under the Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister, there is a task force which is going to look into the problems of the industry. So I think she would be consulting all the stakeholders, and therefore I am very sure that very soon there should be some announcement from the government. I'm not privy to that, so I don't know, but I'm just saying there should be. But anyway, I am going to, with a delegation from Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Narshya Rao, who is another Rajya Sabha MP, who is my colleague, so he was also on the conference, so we going to take our former Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha MP, Hari Babu. So, I mean, 5-6 of us will go and meet the finance minister. But I agree with you that there are a lot of representations, recommendations, concerns have been expressed by the industry, and particularly the small scale industry, who are the worst. They are to bear the brunt the maximum way. So I think I will definitely do that. And as soon as I know, I'll let you know.
Thank you, sir. So coming to the question that we have, one question and two questions on similar lines, which I want to bring to your attention is that while we understand and appreciate the fact that this is a huge opportunity for India, but the bottlenecks that we have in India are still the same. The question of cost competitiveness vis-a-vis, say, China or other countries, as well as the ease of doing business, still remain. We have infrastructure bottlenecks, plus another big challenge is a very high cost of capital. So how do we overcome them? And a similar question is that, I mean, Indian reforms that you are aware of, I mean, you have been a part of this reform wave in governance in India in 1991, 97, 98, and then again 2007 onwards. So which areas, according to you, need reforms eminently, and how do we actually get the help from the government to make these changes? Your views, sir.
Yeah. See, the first point is absolutely well taken. And that's what I was saying, that forces that are really now at work can make India as a natural destination. But to make that reality, we have to work on so many issues. It's not just going to happen just because it is a possibility. And that one area is that what you mentioned is all the infrastructure gaps and bringing everybody together. The bureaucracy, to some extent judiciary, to some extent media, and particularly the state and the central government, but not just state and center, also the district administration. If we bring all of them together and align them to the objective, this can happen. The other area of infrastructure related issues is, of course, the logistic. The cost of logistic is so high in India, and also the time of turnaround of logistic. Thankfully, the Prime Minister, for the first time, created a logistic division, and I was the first minister who handled it. We have prepared a logistic policy, we have prepared a logistic action plan. Hopefully, that issue will get addressed. In fact, one of the days I will request your chamber to organize a program. After that, I'll come to Kolkata and I'll bring some experts from logistic division. We'll discuss that issue, which will actually help you to understand what the government is trying to do on that. Number 3 is interest, which you said cost of funds. This is also a very important issue. Now, if you look at it, one way to address the cost of fund issue is to give interest subvention. Other possibility is to actually do the real cost of interest. The interest is depend upon so many factors. One of them is inflation. Luckily, India's inflation rate is very low today. Now, only issue is that this is a macro level issue. If you reduce, the banks have to lend to the companies, the borrowers at a very low rate. The bank's own cost of funds also must be low. Where the banks get funds from? Banks get funds from you and me who keep money in the bank. So our deposit becomes the source of fund for the banks to lend. So if the bank was to lend less, your and my interest rates have to come down. So this is also another challenging issue. So we'll have to work on a safety net as to when the people who keep money with the bank will get low rate of interest, so that inflation also has to be low. So the net interest will not be negative. In China, one of the reasons why interest rates are low, the Chinese household which give money to the banking system, they get money at something like only 2 or 3%. Incidentally, China's saving rate is more than 50% of GDP. Whereas our saving rate has come down dramatically and it is now really cause of worry. So we have to balance all the issues. But point is, other way of doing it for the short term, while macro level, the real interest rates can be reduced, is interest subvention. And therefore, for some segment of industry, particularly small scale industry, government can open a window wherein they will get rate interest at a funds at a cheaper rate, like we give to agriculture. Agriculture, they get to NABARD refinancing and other mechanism. So I think same way we can use SIDBI, the Small Industrial Development Bank of India, as a refinancing arm, where the banks give money to the small cell sector. The interest subvention can be given by SIDBI to the banks, as well as they'll get refinanced from the banking institutions, so they can give more money. The other way of doing it is government guaranteeing the small scale industry sectors by sovereign guarantee. By doing that, banks are safe. Banks will not be worried about it. Small scale industry will get more money. And when the more money will come, more activities will start. So I think this again can be a great opportunity, and that's how it can be worked. But I fully agree with you that unless we address all these issues together, we'll not get. And in fact, once you address issues, then automatically you see the money coming in a big way. Other aspect, I think that you should keep in mind. We are all talking about FDI. We are talking about more investment coming to India. We're talking about companies from other countries coming to India. Try to understand one thing. Suppose, take example of each one of you. You want to do business in some other countries of the world, correct? What you will expect? You will tell that country, like you are going to Africa. You will tell Africa first to sign a treaty with India so that investment protection happens. Number two, you will say, give me a guarantee that capital repatriation can happen. You will also tell them that I want a guarantee that I can have a free trade, so I can bring raw material from any other country I can export. So actually speaking, trade liberalization is also a prerequisite for getting foreign investment to India. So that must happen. And trade liberalization also has winners and gainers and losers. Somebody will win, somebody will lose. So we have to be ready looking at a broader picture. Now the second question was about which are the sectors in which you see opportunity, right? That is what, Raja, you wanted to ask that other question?
The question was that given these bottlenecks, what reforms you think are imminent or needs to be done so that India becomes competitive?
See, one reform is obviously, one is the administrative reform, so that the entire administration gets focused on making this happen. Judicial reform, which are again very, very important, so that judiciary gets completely attuned. And we may need to have a sort of a judiciary which will deal with economic issues. So they understand those economic issues properly, so they will also understand. There will be, like in some countries, there is a provision. The criminal courts are different. In India also we have the criminal and civil courts are different. But we may have to have a specialist courts dealing with economic issues. So they will understand this very properly. Thirdly, even the reforms have to be necessary for many reasons, the police reforms and others, for many reasons, not just for this. But even the law investigating agencies must focus on economic issues properly. So we may have to create a special cell in the police and in all the investigating agencies who will understand the business better, so that when they want to take action, they will understand it better. Income Tax Department, the Enforcement Directorate, the Revenue Intelligence Department, the CBI, the police. If those investigative agencies, they are properly trained about economic issues, then they will understand business. When you have taken that decision, why you took that decision as an economic decision. And it can go right, it can go wrong, but you will understand. So I think these kind of reforms, of course, labor reform, etc., we already talked about, land reform we have talked about, but I'm saying these are the kind of broad reforms which will help us to understand that business is done in a particular manner, therefore business needs to be supported.
Sure, sir. So there's a question from someone in the education field that post-COVID, looks like a lot of education and teaching is going to go into the digital mode. They've already started converting that. And a lot of this is likely to stay, not change. But now organizations and institutions have invested thousands of crores in physical facilities. How do you think one could convert this calamity into an opportunity from the physical facilities where investment has already been done? Any views on this, sir?
See, firstly, even before this corona, the online education, online activities had increased considerably globally. If you really look at it, and just take example of this. Today, you can book your ticket on your own, travel ticket. If you want to go abroad, you can you can actually make, there's Expedia, there's so many, mybooking.com and how many websites, I don't know. So they will always be there. There's a competition will be there from these online sources. You cannot stop it. But that doesn't mean that brick and mortar business will die. I don't know whether that day I gave the example to Raja, he was talking in his other capacity as a president of Fragrance Association. I don't know whether I spoke about it, even if at the cost of repeating, I'll give the example to you.
Sure, sir, sure.
I used to be chairman of a bank, called Saraswat Bank, when I was the youngest chairman. Did I give that example to you or somebody?
Please, you didn't mention this.
So I'll just tell you something very interesting, the real life situation. When I was the chairman of the bank, I'm talking about 1987, about 35 years ago, the youngest chairman of the largest cooperative bank. We decided to computerize all the operations. Unions were upset, even customers were upset. How do you know whether my money is in the bank or not? Because everything is online. How do you know you are giving, I can see on the screen. So they were also a little apprehensive. We used Infosys to computerize the bank operation. Infosys incidentally was the bank's borrower. I gave them the first loan. And they were the first customer for their new product, which became their most successful product for the finance services, was used by us.
Okay.
So we computerized it. The fear was now who is going to come to the bank? And what happened to job? Because we computerized, the bank grew. Employees which were to do totaling and tallying every day balance sheet, that didn't happen. They didn't have to fill the passbook, the drudgery of that. But that doesn't mean we lost jobs. In fact, created more jobs. In fact, we opened more branches. So now bricks and mortar educational institutions will be there to stay for years to come. Who will not like to, in UK, you think there are no online courses? But why people want to go to Oxford or they want to go to Cambridge? In US, you think there are no online courses? Even Harvard offers online courses, but people still want to go to Harvard and study there. Education is something which I want to have an interface with my professor. I want to enjoy that particular age with my colleagues and friends who I want to study with them. I want to enjoy the atmosphere of that particular university. And therefore, the ethos of education are not just limited only to do this. Even Gurukul, at that time also, because of high nature of enlightenment, you could have imparted education. The guru was so advanced and the disciple also was so committed. He could have given the education to him directly. Like Ramana, Maharishi Ramana, one of the greatest saints ever born anywhere. He had not studied, he dropped out from the school. He had no guru. His knowledge was tremendous and he never used to speak about it. He acquired that knowledge. Or take Ramakrishna Paramos, while so far away is very near to you. He was an ordinary priest, but so advanced. And in fact, he was praying to God, goddess actually, that I want a disciple like him. And then Narendra walked in, and then Narendra became his disciple. Did he give education to Narendra? He gave it through mortal form. But what I'm saying is, so this age-old concept, but even then at that time when the education could have been given like this, Gurukuls were there. So I'll tell you, and today there is a Cambridge, there is Oxford, or there is Harvard, and there is Yale. All the university campuses are there. So campus-based education is not just going to die. I can tell you that. It is bound to happen. Only thing is that the campuses will also have to realize that there is a competition from online platforms. So they will have to also redesign their model of education, and that only would mean that they will not die, but they will thrive only if they also look at the changes that are happening around them. And this is, mind you, the railways. And I was a railway minister. almost all the bookings in railways is now happening through the online platform of IRCTC. Common man is doing this. So people now, everything is going to happen on your mobile phone. And after some time, I don't know what is the next generation is going to happen. I cannot even imagine. I'm not an expert on that. But please understand one thing. These are the changes you cannot stop. You cannot say, I'm going to stop the online, or I'm going to stop technology. I'm not going to allow artificial intelligence to come in, or blockchain technology to come in, or big data to enter my company. It is not possible. If you don't do that, you will die sooner. But if you say, I'm going to have this competition, let me design my ideas properly. I think online education is not going to bring in death knell. It's not going to cause a death knell for the universities and brick and mortar businesses, but can actually help them to add value to it.
Excellent thought, sir. Another question, sir, is that the government, and it is generally always said that MSME is the largest employment generator, and there is a lot of good words which are said for MSMEs. But if you see, sir, in reality, there is little or very little incentive or support which has been given to MSMEs. Even something as small as the MSME payment policy, which the government has, where MSMEs must be given their payments in a certain amount of time. Big corporates, even state governments, find ways to delay it, and they find loopholes or arm twist the supplier to ensure that the payments are delayed. So whether it is cash flow for MSMEs or even any other handholding and support, most states have MSME policies, but what is really offered in terms of handholding and support is very, very low. While in language, we always say that they are the main pillars and the main support system of the country. Your thoughts on this, sir? How MSMEs can be supported specifically?
Now, firstly, I really agree with you that there is a rhetoric normally goes on to say that you are the best person, but actually words do not necessarily follow action, and therefore we do not get the type of support that the MSMEs need. I agree with you. But the fact of the matter is still there, that without MSME, economy of the world cannot go on. Forget India. I'll give you the example, and I will repeat it again, because I was also looking at water resources as one of my 10 cabinet positions. The big rivers can have a flow because of the small streams make that river flow. So large companies cannot survive without small companies. That is true for any large multinational company anywhere in the world. So this is inevitable. Now the government support must come because as a public policy support. Like we support agriculture because we realize food security otherwise will not happen. Not just in India. Globally, there is a huge subsidy which goes on for agriculture. In fact, Europe and US give far more subsidy, or in Japan, give far more subsidy than India gives. In Japan, you cannot export the rice because Japanese are very particular about that sticky rice that they eat. And therefore, they don't allow, and that particular farmers who make that sticky rice grow, they get huge subsidies. Because if they don't do that, then Japanese will not get their staple diet. So agriculture gets public policy support, and therefore they get subsidies. Small scale industry must also get that public policy support because of high employment generation. And as I said, even the large economic companies, large industries cannot survive without the small industries like this. So I think I fully agree with you. We have to do this. Now, there has been a disconnect between the professed ideas and the ground realities. I agree with you. I think Prime Minister Modi is really focused on making small scale industry as a new engine of growth. So let's hope that that will happen in the years to come. And if you don't mind, I know I could have spoken longer and there would be many more questions, but I have some other program to do. So as I joined, so it's 1:15, if you permit me, and I can join you again whenever you want.
Sure, sir. I mean, if you have something else, we'll not press you, and note to all the other
last question. Rishabh, can you just ask him one last question?
So we'll ask you one last question, which is a burning problem for industry as well as for all the chambers of commerce, which is that there needs to be more coordination between policymakers and industry. Especially in times like this, we are all mostly confused. I know Vivek asked you this question about total silence, but there is so much of confusion regarding what is being planned and what is being done. It's a big challenge for us. So how do we increase this coordination, and how does industry today become more aware? Because there is so much of flip-flop on policy, and also a lot of flip-flop on government stand on various things. So how do we go about it, sir?
No, I see the only way, and this is right, see the coordination can actually benefit governments more than industry, because you get the first-hand information, and you get also, so then they don't have to change the policy subsequently, because you already know about it while you are framing the policy about the challenges that are going to come in. So the only way it can be done, and I fully agree with you, and this is what always in my ministries, I always used to do that, is to bring people. In fact, sometimes it was very exasperating for the industry that I used to have so much of consultation. But I am huge beneficiary of that consultative process, because then I could understand the implications of the proposed policy, and therefore we could take timely action to prevent any challenges that will emerge as a result of implementation. So I fully agree with you. And this interaction, for example, what you're asking me, is also helping my thought process very much, that how we should try to work together, how industry thinks about it. So we'll actually working together with industry and stakeholders, not just industry, all the stakeholders, is a great example. I'll just tell you last point. When I was in West Bengal in 2002, Jyoti Basu was still, I think he had, but 1999, he was definitely the chief minister when I was a chemicals and fertilizer minister. 2002, maybe Buddhadev Babu had taken over, I don't remember. But there was a minister of power called Mr. Munal Banerjee, if I'm not mistaken, if I recollect my memory is right. And I told him, I want to consult all your trade unions for the Electricity Act. So he was a little worried, because he said trade unions may not like, they will fight. That doesn't matter. I don't want any police, nothing. I would like to talk to them. You will not believe it. That was one of the most productive interaction I ever had with trade unionists. I had trade union interactions all over the country. I had farmer interaction all over the country about free power. All farmers organizations told me we don't want free power. When I was looking at Interlingua River, I had 5,000 road shows all over India, and made all the NGOs, etc. work with me, including Medha Patkar, because Medha Patkar never, but I used to share diets with her openly and get the most opposition viewpoint. So I think I fully agree with you. There is no other way that we can get a proper input.
Akash, I will now request you to give the vote of thanks. Before I hand it over to Akash, sir, I would personally like to thank you for coming and giving us time. Although time with you is always short, we would definitely be wanting more time, and we will take up on the invitation and have another interaction very soon. Over to you, Akash.
Shri Suresh Prabhu, thank you so much for taking out time, and it is a great honor and privilege to be able to propose this vote of thanks on behalf of the Merchant Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I think what you have discussed today is very topical, and it is very important that we as industry understand how we can put ourselves in the local and the global and the local supply chain. So for that we would request to again take out time and have a more focused session with us on how MSME can actually benefit from this new world order that will emerge post-COVID. And with that, I would like to thank guests and media friends for their presence and participation in this forum. With these words, I propose a warm and hearty vote of thanks and request you all to carry it with acclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all the members and panelists for joining us today. And I apologize to people whose questions could not be taken up due to paucity of time. As Dr. Suresh Prabhu has said, we will organize another session with him soon. In fact, we now have the questions which we will forward him, and probably we'll do it in a different format. Once again, thanks you for joining today, and we hope that this program was engaging and interesting for you. I would just like a very polite reminder that we have another very engaging session at 4 p.m. today with a very, very electrified panel. We have the Commissioner of Customs, Shri P.K. Agarwal. We have the Chairman of Port Trust, Chief Commissioner, thank you for correcting me, Chief Commissioner Shri P.K. Agarwal. We have the Chairman of Calcutta Port Trust, Shri Vineet Kumar. We have Shri Preetam Banerjee, who is from Asian Development Bank. And on top of that, we have Shri Anand Swarup, Joint Secretary from the Ministry of Transport, joining us for this session today in the afternoon on the logistics challenges and opportunities in this COVID situation and beyond that. Please do join us. Thank you.